when you don't give time to candidates to actually digest what they've experienced, then that can lead candidates to be very hesitant and sort of almost marginally suspicious as to are they just taking the first person that are coming in.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Solutions, the leading iGaming PAM platform with a modular approach, including many benefits like a fast, secure, and scalable API-based platform, integrated with all major third-party products and services. Make sure you head over to Pragmatic Solutions and join our smart thinking.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
I have two people on the show today. There's Tyler and there's Krysta. Krysta, you are an international recruiter at Kaizen.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Hi, Heidi. Hi, Tyler. Basically, Kaizen is a global recruitment network, simply put. We're 31 consultants across 18 different locations, which obviously ensures, incredible global reach. We have around 385 clients and counting. And we basically utilize, our experience and our network to obviously get the best talent out there for, the iGaming and fintech space.
And you, I know since 2009, setting up Redbet, you became our first recruiter, and I held a steady hand on to you throughout the years. Yeah. So I'm very, very happy to have just you here.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Thank you.
Bringing your broad experience of recruitment. And addition to this, Tyler Bronson brought to you in Malta since a year back, something like that. You're a talent acquisition manager at Enteractive. What more is there about Tyler that we should know?
Sure. So, yes, I do look after all things talent acquisition and employee branding at Enteractive. We recently just won the NGR Employee of the Year Awards, thanks to my beautiful team and my beautiful company. So I focus on mainly everything to do with recruitment, strategizing and really taking the lead on how we recruit these into different markets, and especially what we do, which is reactivating customers. So it's been a pleasant journey so far, and I'm really interested in this conversation.
About a year ago, you were on my main stage at the HR track as well, at the conference in Valletta.
Correct.
Talking about swipe right, sorry. I'm old-fashioned. I think I have a very beautiful blend in the two of you. And I specifically today, not to make us sit here all day and talk about recruitment, because we could, I want to pick your brains on processes. And, such a boring word. We bring people to Malta. Are we successful in bringing people to Malta? What makes us successful? And in reality, what makes us failing people coming to the gaming industry in Malta or in general? Where do we fail? Because apparently recruitment is such a hardship these days. Yes, rental prices are going up. People are more or less free, or at least able to work remotely. But since our previous conversations with the two of you, I know that you have a different take and different angle on things. And there is actually quite a lot of things that we can do internally to sort of shape up a bit of the recruitment success.
Yes.
Starting with that sort of view, what do the processes, as in, we need to hire this role, make it visible to the world, and here we go. What do processes look today?
Go on, Krysta, you can take that. You can take that one. I'll jump on after. Don't worry.
I think if we had to look at processes, obviously it all depends on the employer. Obviously, I think a hiring process is quite unique, depending on the sort of employer branding, and a company has. I think what seeing that we're talking about, the don'ts, perhaps. I mean, the do's are great, and we can touch upon that. But what I do tend to see at the moment is sort of outdated, underdeveloped hiring processes, which obviously that impacts the whole journey a potential employee is going to experience, right? So I feel like, especially within, there are so many startups at the moment in the industry. It's actually quite incredible, and great. It's fantastic. But an underdeveloped, outdated hiring process, a bad hiring process in general, that hits startups specifically really, really hard. And I feel like in the beginning there's one shot to get the right people in, especially in the beginning.
What is this underdeveloped, not modern?
I mean, look, we all know that because there are remote opportunities, and companies are really trying to offer incredible incentives. That means that there's a wider pool of talent, which is great. But that also means that to get that top end talent, you have to be fast. I feel like there's still very long-winded hiring processes.
As in steps, meeting with the candidates.
And it doesn't necessarily mean steps, because you can have a long-winded two-step hiring process. Because when they decide to open up a role, they don't take into consideration that there's going to be a hiring lead who is crucial to the decision-making process on leave for 2 weeks. Or I've had a situation where they really love the candidate that we put forward, which is fantastic. Candidate is super, driven and committed. A sort of a hiring lead was unwell within the process, despite that person having met the candidate anyway. And that process basically stalled until someone's better, which, that person was lost. These things, I think that there needs to be more agility, more flexibility in a hiring process. So you don't necessarily, it's not necessarily simply put the amount of steps, because obviously I've also had situations where a very senior role was closed within 4 days, and that put a candidate off as well. So
right.
when you don't give time to candidates to actually digest what they've experienced, then that can lead candidates to be very hesitant and sort of almost marginally suspicious as to are they just taking the first person that are coming in. So I do believe, I mean, I can talk about hiring processes for days on end, because obviously that's my bread and butter, and I really do feel like at Van Kaizen specifically, we really try and guide not only people in the recruitment department, the talent department, but we try and guide hiring leads as to how they're actually portraying themselves within the sort of hiring process space.
Right.
I think that is really, really important. I mean, again,
Tyler, you actually personally sort of get to know your hiring managers, because these are your colleagues. How are you affected by this? What is your take?
I mean, it's a really good point that you mentioned that. So being from the agency side, you can kind of just stop working with a client if you don't want them. However, internal, you go to the office every day with them and you see them. So you can't run away in that sense. So it's all about developing relationships with your hiring manager. Now, normally, if we're opening a role, let's say, and I know the hiring manager is going to be sick, and I'm like, normally what I say is, can this wait until you're back? Because I can do all the hard work and then we're going to lose people due to a long-winded process. Yeah. So initially, what I do with my hiring managers, I kind of get them on my side a little bit. If we talk about the long-winded process, initially what I do is I create a thing called FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I say, look, with these candidates that I'm pushing to you right now, if we take a long time, I will just reject them on your behalf. You might say, yeah, they're pretty good, I'd love to interview them, but if you don't interview them soon, I will reject them on your behalf, so don't worry about it. And normally that kind of spurs a little bit of fear, uncertainty, and doubt that this person, okay, I need to be flexible, I need to interview this person. Now, of course, I don't say that about any candidate. We need to say that about good candidates that we're bringing to the business, right? But initially, going back to your Krista's point about recruitment processes being archaic and outdated and 1980s and 1990s, the way that I view recruitment processes is we need to be extremely flexible. There are lots of opportunities out there for candidates right now. Back in the early 2000s, you would say, okay, it's a company-driven market. Yeah. Now it's a candidate-driven market. So this means we need to be extremely flexible. And how do you do that in its simplest form? You speak to the candidate and say, hey, how do you want to be interviewed? Now, normally, this is kind of like a really big shock for them when they say, oh, God, I don't know. How am I supposed to be interviewed? What can I request for? Initially, what I do after that is I give them 3 options and say, hey, look, when I interviewed this person last time, he asked or she asked to meet the CTO and the BI person. Because initially, as a TA department, and typically a HR department, they would structure the interviews. Okay, you meet with a recruiter, then you meet with the senior lead, then you meet with the head of, then you have the meeting with the HR manager. But what about this person who might say, look, I'm a BI analyst, I don't really need to meet a software engineer, I need to meet your data engineers. So they kind of structure it themselves. So this is what I do with Enteractive right now, and it's all about being flexible to what they want, and it's not just can I have it remote and can I come to the office? It's not just that. It's all about how can I know as a candidate that this is the opportunity that is going to work best for me? And how do recruiters know that? Quite simply, ask them. Ask them what they're wanting in that interview process. This is what has worked with me so far, and my time to hire is pretty good. So
I like that because imagine if you already have a say in the recruitment process. Imagine, once you're placed and you're actually in.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also like the fact that you're not someone's assistant.
Not at all. I refuse to be that. There is this weird perception that TA or recruiters in general and the business is kind of like a master-servant relationship. Mm-hmm. And I say absolutely not. We are key integral parts of the business, and the way that I see it, and of course I'm going to say this because it's my job, but TA or recruiters is the best thing in the world. It's the best department. It's the most important, because without people, product, and process, you won't have anything. And we start with the people as well. If you don't hire the right people, that's it. There's many startups and many gambling companies, even just normal businesses here in Malta, that has failed because they've hired the wrong people. And then, of course, that creates like this weird, dare I say, cancerous environment where people then, the good people start to leave, once you've hired the bad people. So definitely take charge. This is my best advice to any agency recruiter, internal recruiter, TA, or whatever. Take charge of that recruitment process because you are the so-called expert,
the fact that you have, the luxury that you have is the fact that it's your own portrait, it's your own brand that you're putting out there. Yep. As a recruiter. So you can't really risk that by sucking up to a manager that's not.
No, definitely not. And I think again, that's such an important point. I really feel like, obviously, agency side, that's all I've known for the last 14 years. But I really do genuinely believe with, how a company treats an agency, a good one. Okay, obviously.
Let's say you.
The respect that they show really does show the value that they have, and they really are people focused. So, if I speak to a client and I ask them, they send me a job spec, for me, that job spec means absolutely nothing. Simply because a spec is generally everything a hiring lead and TA wants into one, which generally doesn't always exist, right? If done incorrectly, okay? Because I guess if you're good at writing job descriptions, people would tend to agree. But what I generally do is I'll ask the TA, or if there isn't one, the hiring lead, to have an in-depth, meeting to discuss the ins, the outs of the roles, things you can't see on a job spec. And when my clients would tell me, we don't have time, that's where I know there's a break in relationship.
Because recruitment is not their priority, right, Krysta? That's the whole idea, right?
But I think educating hiring leads, is so important, because what I'm finding, and I'm literally, I could give you 3 examples in the last couple of weeks. I've been on a massive recruitment drive for one of my clients, and you have the CEO, okay, or you have the visionary that to speak to candidates, and they're amazing, and they they give they create again an incredible experience in terms of how they would want to in terms of a candidate joining their company. And then they meet the hiring lead, and the hiring lead is technically competent, of course, and lovely, but there's an incongruence, there's this almost anticlimax. And it could be a case where it's interpersonal. So it could be a case where the hiring lead just doesn't know how to interview. I've had candidates coming up to me and telling me that the interview was a video call, but they didn't put their video on. But they asked you to put your video on. It could be a case where they actually aren't aligned, and the tap lead or the CEO is totally misaligned in terms of what they want versus what So I really do believe that hiring leads need to be trained, and it isn't their job, rightly so, but they do still need to be trained, because at the end of the day, it's the whole experience that makes.
What if they can't be trained? Some people just can't be trained. There are many areas where I can't be trained.
I mean, I think if they can't be trained, then I'd be very surprised if they're going to be in a leadership role if they can't be trained. So I think then that would be another conversation totally to be had. But the people that are going to be representing, at the end of the day, an interview is employer branding. Because
with the insights that you two have, how much impact in total? Never mind the rental cost, never mind too many sunny days in Malta, never mind, unethical industry views or whatever. In terms of just the impact of untrained managers, hiring managers, or too lengthy processes, how many candidates are we losing out?
Well, I can say from my experience, my candidate drop-off rate is next to 0 because I've taken really full control of the recruitment process. But I would say in general, in other companies that I worked for when I was agency side, I would introduce a really great candidate to a specific company, and they would say, yes, someone's on holiday, we'll get back to it in 2 weeks. It's not a priority right now. And normally, if I get those sort of red and orange flags, or amber flags, shall I say, that, recruitment is not a priority for them, I will say, okay, then let me know when it is. I won't waste people's time, because it's not only your reputation that you are ruining, it's also mine as well. And I refuse to let my quality reputation to be ruined. But I think what a really good point is to, you mentioned like a really valid point about these hiring managers. What happens if they're not trainable? Sometimes they're not. Really, sometimes they're not. Sometimes businesses promote people into leadership positions when they are not suitable for leadership positions, because you have 2 kinds of leaders. You have a technical leader, then you have a people leader as well. Normally, it's the technical leader that then gets pushed into it, rather than someone who is, quite enthusiastic about people leading. But initially, when I would say about getting the requirements from people and getting the importance of people, I show them exactly what I do. I create a very honest channel about exactly what I do as a recruiter. So when I sit down with them and do a briefing call, I bring up LinkedIn Recruiter, I show them the back end, and they say, I want this, I want this, I want this. I'm like, okay, let's see the market. I had a difficult situation in one of my older companies where they said, we just want local people within, let's say, 50 kilometers. I'm like, okay, sure, let's do that. So I put in all the requirements, which is their unicorn candidate. I put in the location of what they're looking for. Lo and behold, there's 2 people. Okay. And then slowly, as you start to peel those requirements back, then we start seeing profiles, which the hiring manager is really excited to see. All of a sudden, I've changed their mind. It's this magical, potion that I've just gave them about changing their mind, because they see what the market is like. From their vision, and people seem to forget this. Hiring managers are not recruiters.
Yeah.
It's not their day-to-day. It's not really their responsibility to do. I mean, it should be, but it's not their responsibility.
Yeah.
So change their mind, change their perception a little bit, and have that FUD as well. It's really good. Yeah.
I literally go in with a highlighter and just say, just pick three things, and why. Why those three? And that's really, and I do tend to do that with HR and with the hiring lead, and just see whether these priorities are actually aligned. And that is really, really important. That is why I wouldn't be able to work with clients that don't give me this time to actually spend more time for me, but it's less time then to actually find the right person in a way that actually matches expectations, because expectations is such a broad word, right?
Yep.
But I do think there needs to be sort of, you need to hone into what someone wants. And obviously in recruitment, if you don't do this, you're going to end up going round in circles, probably going through a hiring process over and over again. And then it gets frustrating for all parties, and it just loses its spark,
And the most interesting thing, Krysta, is you got to think we are on a very small island, okay?
Yeah.
So people talk, Like I have this weird recruitment strategy, which I told about on my speech at iGaming Next, is where I pretend to not be a recruiter. I pretend to be like a business analyst, and I just search around GitHub and start talking to people. Believe it or not, there are really big companies that really champion their employer branding in Malta right now. But on GitHub, it's a completely different story. They're saying the recruitment processes are outdated. I got an offer, they rescinded it. There is a lot of bad mouthing. So that's when initially, when I look at a company, if I want to work with them, let's say if I was a consultant, I check their LinkedIn and everything's, we're the best. Woohoo, we win awards, like with Enteractive, we win awards and stuff like that. Go to GitHub, have a look at their techies, have a look at what they're really saying about the company. And people don't, seem to use it as well. And that's normally how I used to get clients as well. I would speak to senior tech leaders on GitHub as a BA, and I would introduce this random guy called Tyler that might be able to help you out with your recruitment things. He's really good, I promise. And then all of a sudden, I'm jumping on this call and it's like, oh, your voice sounds really familiar. I'm like, yeah, maybe we met in person or something at an event. And then a little sneaky way. Krysta, you might want to use that. It's really good.
Yeah, I'm taking notes, Tyler.
I think you're giving me the answer to my sort of ending question, like what's the best processes, but I still didn't get the response on how many people are we actually, candidates, are we losing out in terms of failing with our bad processes.
I would say it's more than 25%.
I would argue higher.
Much higher, right?
Because right now, like I said, with the war on talent, let's say, candidates have all this free choice, and it's not as if we're Google, it's not as if we're Tesla or Microsoft. We're a smaller company than that, so the competition is extremely high. And then, of course, Malta is quite small. It's quite easy to just navigate around the different companies and move backwards and forwards. So it's all about retention as well.
Yeah.
So my take from this, because I want to pick your brain on other topics in other sessions, is 25 to closer to, what did you say, 50% on dropping out candidates when we don't care about them.
Yep.
And give them our highest priority. It's quite a high number. Tyler, your question on how do you want to be interviewed?
It's a very good point, because it increases that flexibility. And, as a candidate, a lot of recruiters seem to forget what it's like to be on the other side as a candidate. For me, when I'm interviewing for a company, I know which people I want to speak to and how I will work with them. So why don't we give our candidates that flexibility? I introduced it here, especially with a couple of tech roles, and said, okay, well, who do you want to interview? And they say, I need the tech lead, I possibly need the CTO, I need visionary, I need structure. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. And normally when you ask that question, they panic. Oh, I don't know. But then you give them the options. You say, look, last time I interviewed for this role, this person asked for this, another one asked for this. What is going to work best for you? And that is a subconscious kind of like mini contract to show that people genuinely care about you and the business cares about you. They remember that over free pizza and free fruit in the office any day. Yeah.
Definitely. I think when you make a candidate feel unique, which obviously the candidate is, and you give them a voice and you empower them through the interview process, because there is this sort of negative, candidates are, no matter the level, they're still so afraid of interviews. They still get so nervous. Obviously, as part of my process, I always give them a coaching session before, whatever level they are, and sometimes they there is this sort of underlying fear, and there are some companies that have a very sort of serious way of recruiting, which when I do get feedback, I do pass that on to my clients. They look, this is they loved X, but I always try and give them the sort of but. And give them a few tips, because I think that how they present themselves is so important. What I've found as well is that a lot of companies are hiring sort of via video, even though they're both in Malta. Which I find that quite interesting, because obviously there's so much more impact when you're face to face. So that's one of the points I have given a few clients, which is at some point meet them, because there are companies
because it's efficient, right? And you don't want to sit on the other side being a subject to efficiency.
The dynamic completely, it literally just becomes so much deeper.
At the same time, Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt, but then it goes back to that point of we need to be flexible and very quick. People in Malta right now, I mean, you can see that traffic is crazy. The bus services are not exactly the best. So when people are taking time off just to come to your office, surely we can have a half an hour chat over Google Meets, over a phone call. If this person is right, then we decide, okay, let's bring them in,
Exactly. Not on a first stage. And what a lot of companies are doing at the moment, which I find quite incredible, is they're meeting people after hours. So they're actually not allowing their interviewees to take time off, to have to take time off work. So a lot of my interviews in the last sort of few weeks have been after work, so 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and
I think that's really cool.
I really find that to be in without sort of almost subliminally showing respect for someone else's job. Because I in the past there was this sort of if they're interested in us, they have to take time off, but not necessarily. You know what I mean? You don't know what a person's sort of work life is about. So again, I think agility is so important. Flexibility is important, and also taking each process and looking at it in a very sort of tailored, unique way. That sort of brings back to what Tyler said, which I'm totally on board with as well.
I think that whole idea of meeting after work. I mean, it depends. You have to ask about that flexibility, or whatever. People have prior arrangements or whatever. But I like this idea, and it's the only thing I like about old age recruitment, which is let's go meet in a bar. Let's have a beer, or let's go to a coffee shop. Let's discuss what we actually want. It's a non-formal situation to be in, so you feel a little bit more comfortable than being in a stuffy room with xenon lights and feeling, oh God, I have to wear a suit and tie. No, I could just meet someone.
Neutral grounds.
It's a neutral ground. I'm not in your office. You're not in mine. We're in a neutral ground. Let's do that. I really like that idea. I think it's awesome.
Is there anything that we need to discuss in this call that we cannot discuss in another call in the future?
I think there's too much to talk about, and I think we probably need another call to do so.
20 other points.
Exactly.
I mean, we could. I think sort of the hiring process. There's we've literally just scraped the surface. I really think
it's only 10%. Yeah.
I really think it's an important part. I really think we need to sort of continue on and discuss more of this.
We need to discuss it more.
There's so much more. And at the end of the day, like Tyler's mentioned too, this is the beginning. This is where it all starts. If you don't get this right, the rest won't even happen. So exactly. I really think that we could together sort of highlight and reinforce what works, what doesn't work. Obviously, it's not a one size fits all. But I really think that we should continue on hiring process. There's pages and pages to discuss.
There's a lot more.
Amazing. Have a fantastic rest of the day, and thank you for starting this up.
You too. Super.
Likewise.
As always.
Likewise.
Super.
Thank you so much.
Ciao. Thank you. Bye.